What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Monday, February 17th, 2025 edition of the Daily Energy News Beat. Stand up. Here are today's top headlines. First up, the end of coal is nowhere in sight. This will be a good one, sticking upon that coal theme. Next up, coal consumption remains high in the United States. We'll fly over to China. Could China hack our electrical grid? In 4 words, yes, and how soon? The real question is Mayorkas on it? This is a great deep dive into our electric grid. And finally, quote, BRICS is dead if it messes with the dollar, according to Trump. We'll stick on the Trump theme. He and Trump unleashes LNG and drilling in free-for-all. Stu will then toss it over to me. I will quickly cover what happened in the oil and gas markets on Friday. Really a pretty down week or down day, and the third week oil prices have finished down relative to where they started. We did actually see a slight bump up in rig counts and then a potential Diamondback double eagle buyout that we will cover, and we will cover it all, folks. As always, I'm Michael Tanner, joined by Stuart Turley. Hey, where do you want to begin?
Hey, let's start with the end of coal is nowhere in sight. You got to love a good story like this one. Retirement of coal power plants in the West has done nothing to reverse global coal demand. It's all about China, and the article does a great job going through. Global operating coal power capacity has increased by 13% in 2015. And then you take a look at that map, Michael, I took it from the global power plants. Look at where all the global power plants are. South Africa, the United States, India, and China. Holy smokes, Batman. Until China changes it, there's going to be no reason to shut our coal plants down.
And I love they're all skewed towards the East Coast, which is an interesting little note there. You notice the places like Texas and up and down the Midwest where we have a lot of oil and gas, there's not that many coal plants going. So very interesting. Now, obviously, we know in the East Coast we do have the largest natural gas reserves in the United States, but that a lot of that natural gas is piped down to Texas to get refined. And then, the East Coast ends up burning fuel oil and coal. So very interesting there. Yeah, not much is going to change. I mean, coal is still right now the baseload power of choice, at least for the electrical grid. Now, obviously, if you're talking about the data center boom, that's not necessarily what they're looking at, but it really is interesting to look at the disbursement of all these coal plants. And I think it leads right into this next one here about where coal consumption is going.
Oh, yeah. The next article is coal consumption remains high in the U.S., and it's in a little more specific details on it. And the EIA forecasts coal share of the U.S. electricity will fall to a record low of 16.1% in 2024. We are cutting out, but you know who a great man once said? Chris Wright just said he's not going to be shutting down any more plants. So, he now understands. Coal production has fallen in recent years and oil and gas production increased. So you take a look at the EIA numbers, 2.7% year on year from 2022 to 2023, 577.9 million tons.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is that if you dig into the numbers here, you see that the production of coal is actually falling quicker than consumption, which, again, leads to, okay, that's fine. But the question is what's going to fill in the gap, For reference, the United States is the 4th largest coal producer. That's behind China, India, and Indonesia. But we also happen to have the most coal reserves of any country. We have about 206 active coal plants that remained at the end of 2023, and about a quarter of the domestic coal generation is expected to be retired by the end of 2040. That's only about 25%. But the pace of planned retirement slowed last year as energy demand increased.
Right. And we're going to see a continued slowing of that. Hey, let's go to the next one. Speaking of grids, could China hack our electric grid? In 4 words, yes, and how soon? The real question is, Mayorkas still in on it, or was he in on it? The answer is yes. I originally posted that article after interviewing Michael Yon in the Darien Gap on January 12th, 2024, Michael. This post just came out over the weekend from the Disrespected Trucker, and it turns out that there is now that original article talks about 32 major grid interconnects that were, one of them was seized and it was taken, and now back doors were found. There are now 492 transformers confirmed with back doors in our grid. When I originally wrote this story, there was only 32. Wow. Yeah, Biden let them in.
Well, I think this is a topic that we've been talking about for years now, is the fragility of the grid. And with President Trump and his, Secretary of State Rubio, the Defense Department, they're fairly adversarial with China. And we can whether or not you agree or disagree with whether or not we should be adversarial towards China, the question is, if they perceive us to be more adversarial, they're coming for the grid, and it's basically open season because it's not hard to do it.
Oh no, they could take it down within about 15 minutes. And we talked about this on this podcast before, where they connected to the grid via the balloons that now turned out oh, wait a minute, that's a conspiracy theory. They were actually electronically capable of connecting to the grid. So let's go to the next story here. BRICS is dead if it messes with the dollar. That story also goes in with our LNG, because LNG is Trump's ace in the hole for exports. The world is coming to the realization we're now, between these two stories, we are now opening up tariffs, reciprocal tariffs across every country. And I love the way he did that. And Canada has 200% tariffs on our agricultural products. Okay, let's start putting 200% on Canadian products. I'm okay with his thought process on these two articles. He's going to be using, and it's, Michael, before you cringe and you start telling me to be quiet, it is a negotiation point on how he does this thing. And this is how President Trump does things. LNG is going to be his ace in the hole as he goes through in the next 2 weeks to start really negotiating with President Trump. Zelensky is no longer even at the table. President Putin and President Trump, and now the EU is not even at the table. And so they're going to get the end of the Ukraine war done. And you're going to see trade wars really coming around in a positive way. So you take a look at BRICS. BRICS was really successful, Michael. You and I talked about this as well, and that is because we had weaponized the U.S. dollar.
Yes, but and so my only question is a tariff not weaponizing the dollar?
No. If they're already tariffing us, they're tariffing they're weaponized their dollars, and they're not buying our material. So his is, if you are already tariffing the United States, I'm going to put reciprocal tariffs back on. Why are all the tariffs one way? I'm all in, baby. So you're telling me that we should just lay down and let everybody tariff our stuff and never buy our stuff?
Well, I mean, we do have the largest GDP in the world, so something's working right. All I am pointing out is that the reason why BRICS was looking at an alternative currency was because of the United States weaponization of its status as the world's reserve currency.
Right.
And if we want to keep it that way, that doesn't mean, a good leader doesn't just say, I'm the leader, suck it up, whatever I say goes. That's not what a good leader does. A good leader works with its consortium of people to come up with a solution that benefits not just one, but all. So I think tariffs on some goods are okay, and I'm not against tariffs 100%. I'm not for 100% tariff. I agree with what President Putin said. I'm not a Putin fan, but I agree with what he said. He condemned the U.S. government. He said at the end of this little, the last paragraph here in the article, calling the dollar's weaponization a big mistake that is driving nations to explore alternatives. We shouldn't be driving nations to explore alternative currencies because that will be detrimental to us. And a 100% tariff is not going to work when BRICS now has 36% of the global GDP, almost 50% of the world's population, and is exploring bringing other people in. So I think there's a fine line we've got to walk here because we do not want BRICS to come out with another currency. That would be detrimental to our economy, and anything we do that, again, everything's a fine line here. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. And I think President Trump is teeing it up for negotiations. And that's all it is. People need to understand President Trump is negotiating and saying it. What drives the liberals nuts is the way he talks. And I think it's kind of funny because he's not going to end up with tariffs for everybody. He's going to end up with negotiated things. I think it's a great way to do it.
Art of the deal, baby. Art of the deal. What's next?
Well, Trump unleashes LNG, and he's got this last part all toes in, and it's unleashes LNG and drilling for all. It's still not going to be drill, baby, drill. This is wasted no time in flexing his pro-fossil fuel stance, approving the first LNG export permit since Biden's controversial pause last year, in which he doesn't remember doing it. I thought that was absolutely hysterical. Commonwealth LNG, the long-awaited recipient of the permit, can now proceed with 9.5 million metric tons per annum exported in Louisiana. We love it. And when you talk about BRICS and you talk about Russia and you talk about the end of the Ukraine war, they're meeting in Saudi Arabia in the next couple weeks. It'll probably be 3 weeks. And you're going to see Putin, president, and Saudi Arabia all sit down. Now, you think about this. President Trump's got LNG on the table. Yep. And that is his big weapon saying, hey, if you want to not pay tariffs, buy our LNG. Here's a side note. We don't have the tankers in the United States control to guarantee shipments. Ooh, we got to get rid of the Jones Act.
Well, no, you've been on the Jones Act for a while. Commonwealth, I think LNG is, the biggest winner in all of this, aka they're owned by Kimmeridge, who has placed a really large bet into the LNG space. So that seems to be working up okay with them. It is fascinating that now I think it is the fascinating part about all of this is where you're going to see some of the new development from the large infrastructure goes. And we talked about plenty. We talked about this at NAPE. Drill baby drill is coined by Chris Wright, is really build baby build. And so I think this is the first step in that.
You bet.
The nice part is it the executive branch and the Secretary of Energy and Interior do have fairly large, broad authority to do a lot of this stuff, which is helpful because this stuff can now move quickly. I'm all for LNG, so I think this is awesome.
Oh, I think it's a great way to export and get U.S. dollars and the save the U.S. currency, because there is a gold row happening around the world with a shortage of actual gold being held versus what is in the actual vaults. And I find it funny that there's now a call for Doge to audit Fort Knox.
Yeah, it's
Ruh-roh.
That's a story for another time. Let's go ahead and jump over to Finance Stu. But before we do that, we've got to pay the bills. As always, thank you for checking us out here on the world's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com. Stu and the team do a tremendous job making sure that website stays up to speed. Everything you need to know to be the tip of the spear when it comes to the energy and the oil and gas business. Hit the description below for all links to the timestamps, links to the articles. You can also subscribe to us via our Substack, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com, the best place to support the show. Go ahead and sign up for a paid subscription. You get access to a bunch of premium articles and premium papers that we only publish to that Substack for paid subscribers, and get easier access if you want to ask Stu or myself any questions about the business. Also, shout out to our sponsor, Reese Energy Consulting. With all this stuff going on in LNG, guys, if you are in that space, you need to be working with Reese Energy Consulting. They can take you soup to nuts on any project, help you navigate the regulatory stuff. And then also, if you're an E&P operator, they have a really well-defined, built-out out oil and gas marketing business where they will help you make more money on your gas contracts and with your first purchaser contracts for oil. You're leaving money on the table if you're not working with an oil and gas marketing company. And we love Reese Energy Consulting, so go ahead and reach out to them, guys. Their stuff is in the description below. And finally, if you want to become Billy Bob Thornton from Landman, go ahead and go to investinoil.energynewsbeat.com. We have a bunch of great resources there about how you can get started, how you can make a little bit of a distribution, save a boatload on taxes, and wear a cowboy hat to all your parties and say, I am Billy Bob Thornton from Landman. So those three things right there, guys, highly recommend going there, investinoil.energynewsbeat.com. Let's go ahead and quickly, Stu, and just look at top-line indices. S&P 500 basically flat on Friday. NASDAQ was up about 0.3 of a percentage point. 2 and 10-year yields were down 1.1 and 1.2 percentage points. Conservatively, dollar index was down about 0.25 of a percentage point. Bitcoin, $96,000 and about $800. That's about 0.76% down. Crude oil was down about 55 cents, about 0.75 of a percentage point, down to 70.74. Brent oil was down about 0.3 of a percentage point, 74.75. We're testing that $70 range. We're recording this about 1 o'clock here on Sunday, and markets appear to open a little bit down from crude oil side. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Our XOP, which is our E&P securities contract, was actually up about 0.8 of a percentage point. Natural gas was up to $3.72, or up about 2.6 percentage points. I think that the main reason for crude being down is, as Stu mentioned, that prospective Russia-Ukraine peace deal that both Russia and the United States are in the middle of negotiations. A lot of that, while that was, and the reason why those peace deals are negative for oil prices is that could, unleash these quote unquote sanctions that are having, or ease the sanctions that Russia has, which we'll see more crude oil come back onto more the global market. Obviously, Russia is still exporting, but they are more selective in where they can, and a lot of that isn't necessarily touching the global markets. A lot of that downward pressure on oil was stopped by the fact that the U.S. announced that in April they're going to go ahead and give more tariff recommendations, as we talked about. As we know, tariffs will raise the price of goods coming into the States, and with us being about a 40% importer of oil, that will affect more prices. So those two things kind of balance what could have been a really down day for oil. Obviously, we know that Iran is and the pressure being put on Iran to slow and stop as much oil production as possible. It'll be fairly interesting. We also did see, we can go ahead and put this chart up on the screen. Rig counts were up too, though, despite oil going down. So there is an interesting sentiment going on right now in the business. I would say 2 rigs is basically flat. I do think the interesting thing is that is 3 weeks in a row we have seen rig counts rise. So something is moving.
Offshore,
you want to say something?
Yeah, offshore or onshore, did it say?
Onshore rigs. 2 onshore rigs.
Okay, cool.
Again, I think offshore is still getting geared up, and offshore again plays the long game. Not, it's a 5 to 10 year cycle for when you're talking about onshore or offshore development. They're not necessarily playing the weekly price game, whereas an onshore company might do a little bit. I do think one of those rigs was a natural gas rig, so I do think that some of that stuff goes in there. The other interesting thing I saw, Stu, on the M&A front, Diamondback in talks to buy Double Eagle for more than $5 billion. Wow. This is a big one here, guys. Diamondback Energy, as we know, recently just gobbled up Endeavor Resources for $26 billion, and now they're apparently, according to sources, in talks to buy Double Eagle, which is majority backed by NCAP and Apollo Global Management, and this could be about $5 billion. If you recall, last year, there was reports that they were exploring the sale of Double Eagle's exploring a sale that could be worth more than $6.5 billion. So the price has gone down a little bit. And, as we record this on Sunday afternoon, as you listen to this on Monday, things might actually have been announced, but also it could be possible, as this person said in part of the negotiations, that a new suitor comes out. I mean, again, $5 billion, for 90,000 BOE per day and about 55,000 net acres. It's actually a pretty good deal. I would have expected it to be slightly more. As we know, the Double Eagle is on their 4th iteration. They've actually already spun up Double Eagle 5. So wonder, a lot of this might be NCAP, who was also backing Double Eagle 5, wanting to liquidate their position in 4, get some liquidity, be able to come in and prop up Double Eagle 5 even more. So very interesting source there. Nobody really responded to any of these requests, and this was all courtesy of the Wall Street Journal. So super interesting. I think Double Eagle gets, having been kind of the Double Eagle gets a lot of the PE praise as they're kind of the gold standard for how to run the PE markets, mainly due to the fact that they were able to start back in the early 2010s when it was kind of the heyday for private equity and acquisitions. And so now, once you prove you can do it once, you get more money. Once you prove you can do it twice, you get a lot more money. And now when they're on 3, 4, and 5, you get a lot more money. So it'll be very interesting to see where things go. But Diamondback in talks to buy Double Eagle. We will see where this goes. That's really all I've got, Stu. What should people be worried about this week?
Oh, I don't know about worried. I think keep your head on a swivel. There's still a lot of things going around out there, but I think the world is healing. And I think we're going to see some big financial news more out of Doge. I think people are going to wake up and go, how corrupt is our government?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, guys, with Doge luckily we don't take any government financing, so Doge isn't coming for us, but we appreciate you guys sticking with us as always. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We appreciate you guys checking us out. We will see you tomorrow.